legit questions, the questions that naturally come to mind when you start learning about Bitcoin. They were already asked in 2011. The answers you can find still today on Bitcoin Talk. These questions are still valid pretty much today. Finally, they published it in early 2012, and I predicted that Bitcoin would be worth one day 600 euros. It would compete against gold, and a very conservative estimate back then in 2012. And as you know, Bitcoin has gone way beyond that since then. Bitcoin was a payment system and a new form of money, but as a form of money, it was more comparable to gold. And as a result, I felt it would take a share of the pie that gold was dominating, that is a store of value hedged against inflation. And it's important to understand that any monetary system is supposed to reduce the entropy. Bitcoin is an entropy reducing system, and as such, it can be analyzed as such.
Before we get started with all the topics, and there's a lot of interesting things with you. You have been a Bitcoin OG for a long time, and I think we can learn a lot from you. But before we get started with all the topics, maybe give the viewers and the listeners some overview of who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I was for a long time. I'm an engineer by training, and I was for a long time an engineer working on payment systems for more than 20 years. And I also studied business at Columbia Business School in New York in the 90s. So in the 90s, I developed both my professional expertise, but also I was exposed to the workings of Wall Street and of the financial system, and I started immediately having doubts about the number of intermediaries and, more importantly, the amount of money, the capture of money they were capable of exerting on the system. So I felt this system was really suboptimal. So that's how I got interested in the people that were trying to find alternative solutions. And that's exactly how I got involved in Bitcoin very early on, because I had the opportunity to read the white paper, and evidently it checked all the boxes of the system that many people like myself were hoping for. We were then back at the end of 2008. But I didn't think immediately that this would be what it is today. I just thought it's outstanding work, intellectual work. It's an amazing invention, but I had no idea that this would become a working network. However, in 2011 and 2010 it started, and 2011 it became obvious that Bitcoin was working, and that it was going to be a huge thing, because adoption really started then. And the reason that it started is because we were starting to see exchange platforms. Exchange platforms played a crucial role because it enabled the people to have a price for Bitcoin. So it enabled them to buy a Bitcoin and sell them. Again, in 2011, it became obvious it was going to be a success. So I dropped my job and decided to go full-time on Bitcoin. And I was wondering, what could I do in the Bitcoin ecosystem in 2011? And it was all about exchange, because the exchanges then were very starting startups, fragile ventures, and MT Gox showed how fragile they were. So we felt, with my associate, there was an opportunity to develop an exchange. So we did, and we started Paymium, the company I'm the president of today. And Paymium is an exchange, Bitcoin Euro exchange, where you can buy and sell Bitcoins. And we've been in business for 15 years now.
That's amazing. For like 2011, seeing Bitcoin and seeing like what's the projected thing for you, and not only going to buy it, because like a lot of people saw it and didn't buy it the first time around. And I myself needed like about 3 to 4 years from first time hearing about it till I actually bought it. It was way later, like 2017 and 2020, but seeing it and then not only buying it, but actually also saying like, hey, I quit my job and just want to build into this thing. This is really impressive because like it needs a lot of conviction. And 2011, in my eyes, there were a lot of open questions still with Bitcoin, and you probably also like what made you so intrigued in this whole thing? Where like, let's dump money and my time into this thing.
You mean what made me decide to go full time on Bitcoin?
Yes, and especially like 2011 was very different. I think people that are listening to now and they might see all the podcasts and all the things that are going on. It's a very different place. 2011, there were no content creators or anything like that. It was very hard to do anything in Bitcoin.
That's right. However, there was a platform that played a crucial role beyond the mailing list, because as you know, mailing lists were really for specialists and professionals like I was. But the changer, the game changer was Bitcoin Talk, I believe, because Bitcoin Talk was very active then, starting 2010. And all the questions that you hear today that people have, and they are legit questions, the questions that naturally come to mind when you start learning about Bitcoin, they were already asked in 2011. And what amazes me is that the answers you can find still today on Bitcoin Talk about these questions are still valid pretty much today, because nothing's changed in Bitcoin. That's the beauty of Bitcoin. It's been here for 15 years, and it hasn't changed. Fundamentally, it's the same protocol. So all the answers that were given back then by very smart people, like I can't name them because there are so many very smart people back then that were active on Bitcoin Talk, like Gavin Andresen, Satoshi, even though he left early on. Sergio Lerner, people, lots of very smart people, and they had the good answers, precise and good answers. So that every month, every week that went by, you grew more convinced about Bitcoin, in fact, because every time you had a question, you found a very valid answer to your doubts, to your objection. And that's still the situation today. But as you point out, there are many more talking heads today. And congrats, by the way, for what you're doing, because you are doing a very good job. But unfortunately, not everybody is doing a good job. And it's important that you have podcasts like your podcast, because it's quality content and there is a lot of junk. And that's perhaps the major difference between now and 2011. 2011, basically, you had Bitcoin Talk, and that was it. And now you have many options to choose from.
Yeah, also exchanges and the ecosystem in general probably got better, and that there was no Lightning network. So like there's a lot of things.
Oh yeah. From the technologies, progresses have been impressive. Yes, absolutely.
But it's really impressive that Bitcoin hasn't changed. It's just the ecosystem around it, like the Lightning Network. We have like the exchanges, we have the content creators, we have like all the people around
RGB,
Bitcoin.
Things
it's fascinating. And now I think you wrote also a book, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, I wrote a couple of books. In fact, I wrote the first book that was called simply the Bitcoin book. Because the title was available, I felt it was natural. But I wrote it in French because that's my native language. And I started looking for a publisher, and the publishers simply didn't get it. I found that the publishing industry was even more backwards and obsolete than the banking industry. So these people have no idea, how to handle innovative content. So they didn't know what I was writing about. So the book, I ended up self-publishing the book. So I didn't have as many readers as I could have, and as a result, there are fewer millionaires because people who wrote the book, Bitcoin book in 2011 or 2012 had a chance to make a fortune if they wanted to, if they got it. So. But that's part of the problem we had in the early days, is because there were so many resistance, ignorance, and as a result, people that could have been exposed to Bitcoin simply didn't have the information, and there weren't enough voices. I think Max Kaiser in the US is probably the most visible person that really got the word out about Bitcoin. In Europe, we had a political party called the Pirate Party, Pirate Partei in Northern Europe, with someone called Rick van Vinger, also made some good progress in terms of exposing Bitcoin to the general public. But this was difficult. So yes, I wrote this book, but today I'm here to talk about the last one, and that's energy, the flip side of money. So it's about energy.
That's super interesting, but it's fascinating for me, like seeing Bitcoin in 2011 and like writing a book about it and all those things. Like that's super impressive. Do you had like an initial thesis on Bitcoin, where Bitcoin can go and how Bitcoin can develop in the coming years? And from 2011, we have now 14 years basically. Like this is already a kind of long history that we have since 2011. And how has this initial thesis of Bitcoin kind of held up towards what Bitcoin is now?
Yeah, I wrote an article in 2011 that I finally got published in early 2012. So it took me 6 months to get a review, a newsletter to publish the article. And finally, they published it in early 2012. And I predicted that Bitcoin would be worth one day 600 euros. Because I felt it could take a small fraction of what gold was as a store of value. It would compete against gold, and a very conservative estimate back then led me to believe it would hit 600 euros in a few years, in say 3 to 4 years. So that's what I wrote in 2012, and as you know. Bitcoin has gone way beyond that since then. But yes, that was my thesis. It's because I knew, as a payment professional, I knew money and the payment systems are two sides of the same thing. You don't have money if you don't have a payment system to make it, transferable to between users. So Bitcoin was a payment systems and a new form of money, but as a form of money, it was more comparable to gold. And as a result, I felt it would take a share of the pie that gold was dominating. That is a store of value hedged against inflation.
Interesting. And I mean, 600 euros, it seems so like, in hindsight, it seems so bearish. It seems so like, 600 euros like that. Like we cracked it really quickly. But at the time, probably this was like outrageously bullish. I was like, 600 euros, that's a lot of money. The same as people look at probably now when people say, it will go to 1 million or 10 million or anything like that. Is your thesis now changed where you think that Bitcoin might outgrow gold, and how you look at like the next 15 years kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm convinced that Bitcoin will go bigger than gold now. At the time, I thought it was going to be a fraction of what Bitcoin was. Now I think it's the reverse will happen. Gold will become a fraction of what Bitcoin is going to be, because it's just a superior form of store of value. And that's because I understand, and I share this understanding with my readers, that as a store of value, it's also a store of energy, so to speak, store of past energy. With gold, it's a physical proof that energy was expended to create the coin. And with Bitcoin, it's a mathematical proof. But in essence, It's a proof of what? It's a proof of energy in both cases. But the fact that Bitcoin is a mathematical proof is just much simpler to handle on networks like in the internet, obviously. And gold is just obsolete as a form of proof because it's just much harder to use as a proof. So that's why I think now that Bitcoin is going to be bigger than gold, probably 10 times bigger than gold. And the metrics of many people that are professional economists have predicted that it could go effectively to, for instance, Michael Seyr is predicting Bitcoin at 20 million a piece in 20 years, which is now sounds like almost a reasonable assumption. And if that's the case, it means Bitcoin is going to be effectively bigger than gold.
It's crazy to think about where Bitcoin is coming from and where it's kind of going. And you wrote the book, as you said, the energy, the flip side of money. Why focus on energy? Like, what's the fundamental thing about energy, and then it's like the money is kind of the side effect here.
Well, in fact, I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, like you did, like many of us did. I found energy, but I found a corridor leading to energy. But in fact, the corridor leading to energy is in fact leading to a much bigger rabbit hole, and that's the rabbit hole of energy. In fact, Bitcoin is a subset of the energy rabbit hole. That's what I found, and I think it's an important enough finding that I had to share it with as many people as possible, because it's almost a life-changing experience to discover that energy is in fact everywhere. And not only is it everywhere, it's inside us, and we are made of energy. And that's a very, very important discovery in learning about yourself. That's the life path that we are traveling. You discover that energy is everywhere, and it's probably the uniting force and the substance of the universe of which we are part of. So that's why I wrote about energy, and writing about energy obviously helps help me understand and teach about Bitcoin, because it explains why Bitcoin is using energy, in fact.
And it's interesting because if you look at energy that is kind of ruling everything, then it's like Bitcoin is the best measuring stick for energy. Like Bitcoin is the best representation or unit of energy. Is that kind of the thesis you're going with?
Yes, in fact, what I discovered in studying this subject is that the value of money comes from two components, if you will. One component is the energy value of money, and the other component is the social value. The energy value is, for instance, for Bitcoin, the electricity that was spent to produce the coin, and for gold, the same thing. For the euro, the dollar, the energy comes from someone that has borrowed money. That's credit-based money. So there is a borrower that has promised to work to repay the loan, and that's where the energy comes from in the case of the euro or the dollar. So that's for the energy value, and the social value is linked to the acceptance network, if you will, of the money. If it has a huge acceptance network, like the euro or the dollar, a good chunk of the value comes from that. For Bitcoin, it's the same thing. Ethereum, for instance, it is proof of stake, has zero energy value because it's proof of stake. But it has social value because there is a strong ecosystem around Ethereum. And so all the value of Ethereum as money today is social value, zero energy value. In the case of Bitcoin, you do have these two components, energy and social value.
Interesting, because then you have in Bitcoin not only the social value of the money side and also the energy one. It's interesting. I've never thought about having having something in two sides, like the energy side and then also the social side. It's an interesting concept. And then it's like when people say, oh, like Bitcoin only has value because other people buy it, and there's always some truth to it because that's the social layer of it.
Exactly.
But it's actually only true for things like Ethereum because that's just the social value and there's no energy value in it. And then the gold aspect is also like there's an energy value and a social. That's really interesting because then you can argue in a very easy to understand way of why things have value, and there's like more to it than just the energy value and the utility value. Because if I mine a Bitcoin today and sell that very Bitcoin in 20 years, I get a lot more than just the energy value that I put in today. If I sell it today, I only get a little bit more probably, like the mining industry than I actually mine it for, depending on like my energy bill and all those things. That's an interesting aspect, that it has the energy component, but also the social component. But I guess the social component is the really important one, because if no one wants to buy it, then it's still the hard one.
Exactly. And the social value is tied to the concept of entropy, which is very close to the concept of energy. Entropy is in physics is what you'd call hidden information. So you are reducing entropy by finding hidden information. It's kind of abstract, but it's at the heart of the concept of data and information, which is crucial. It's crucial to understand it in a digital world, the world in which we live today. And that's why I spent some time in the book explaining or talking about energy and entropy. But I must admit that entropy is very abstract, and many people have difficulty with abstraction and find it difficult to understand what entropy is about. But think of entropy as a way of simplifying the world, if you will. The more you reduce entropy, the more order there is, the less chaos there is. And a money system, if it has a social value, reduces the entropy of society because it puts value on things through the formation of prices, and it facilitates trades also. So that's how a monetary system reduces the entropy. It's an entropy reducing system, in fact, for society. So that's explained in the book, but I must admit it's a kind of abstract, and that's why you have to read the book. I think a podcast might not be enough to grasp what the concept of entropy is, because it's also a concept that has emerged fairly recently, say since the 19th century, relatively recent for the history of science. But again, some people are still struggling with the concept of entropy. And the concept of energy, which seems simpler, also has evolved since the 19th century. And now it's, as I said, it could be considered as uniting all the forces of the universe, which was not the case in the 19th century. Energy was thought about just as heat and forces, but not to the extent where it is today recognized as a universal force.
Do you also then think that everything will be eventually just be measured into Bitcoin? If energy is the universal force, and then Bitcoin is the best thing that we can measure energy in?
As money, yeah, I think it's a superior form of money to put prices on things, including prices of energy, because effectively today, many people have pointed out that, for instance, the oil exporting countries are exporting oil for that's limited supply in exchange for money that's printed in unlimited supply. That is the US dollar. So that's clearly like what we are using here, the social value of the dollar. Clearly, the energy value of the dollar is not sufficient to compensate for the price of oil expressed in dollar. Whereas in the case of Bitcoin, you could have a more precise measure because the energy value of Bitcoin, as you know, is a fixed supply. So it's not distorted by excessive money creation like can be with traditional, state-issued money. So in that sense, Bitcoin is superior. But Bitcoin is information. Money is a message. The transaction is a message. It's a piece of information. So it cannot be measured in joule, in a unit of energy, because it's not energy. It's entropy. It's changing the entropy of the system. It's not changing. It's not an amount of energy. So, but as a piece of information, Bitcoin is much more reliable than traditional money.
You also talk about thermodynamics, I think, in the book. What's the connection between like Bitcoin and thermodynamics? I think Michael Seyr is probably like one that usually talks about it, but there are actually not that many people that talk about the connection.
Yeah, well, thermodynamics is the old name of the science of energy. Again, because at the time where they were using thermodynamics as the name for the science of energy, it was mostly about heat and heat machines, steam machines in the 19th century. Now we know energy goes way beyond just thermal phenomenon. But yes, it's crucial to understand thermodynamics because thermodynamics is about the concept of energy and entropy. And as I said, Bitcoin is an entropy reducing system. And as such, it can be analyzed as such. And it's important to understand that any monetary system is supposed to reduce the entropy, and it can be measured. You said, how can it measure energy that's exchanged in a trade? Yes, in fact, that's the whole point, and that's something I write about in the book. I write about measuring value in joule, in energy, in terms of energy. So you could always analyze value as an amount of energy, because when you think something is valuable to you, it means that something is either saving energy for you. For instance, the machine, you're using a machine to save the energy that you would expend without the machine. If you are using a bicycle, you're saving energy compared to the energy you would spend if you were walking without the bicycle. So the value of the bicycle comes from the energy you are saving with the bicycle. And that's something you can use as an anchor, if you will, to anchor the notion of value with a measure of energy. It can also be, and that's where it gets tricky, can also be a way to release new energy. It's not only about saving energy, it's also releasing new energy, finding a new flow of energy that you can capture and use. And for instance, a car is saving energy for you because you are saving energy compared to using walking, or for instance, but also you are releasing energy because you can put fuel in the car, and fuel is transformed by the car in chemical energy. So that's energy released by the car. So it goes way beyond simply saving energy. So the value, like money, I talked about the two components of the value of money, energy and social value. In the case of value itself, value can be has two components. It's the energy you save and the energy you release with the good that you are considering. So that means I propose an energy analysis of the concept of value, if you will, in the book.
Interesting. So thermodynamics, just to go back on this, is just other word for energy in general. Like it's just
exactly.
Like means energy.
Exactly. And the point I make in the book is that you can analyze the economy as a thermodynamic phenomenon almost, and measure all the trades and exchanges between people as flows of energy.
Do you look at metrics like, and I don't know even know how to do that, but maybe how many satoshis does one joule cost? Like, it's like something like comparable, like actual energy to like satoshis.
Yeah, we could do the exercise. To be honest, I haven't done the math or the additions, so to speak, to give you a number. But someone could do it based on the findings in the book, and the approach that I'm proposing can be. You could measure potentially. Today, you can measure actually the energy value of Bitcoin through the hash rate. If you make estimates of the efficiency of the machines with the hash rate, you can come up with an estimate of the energy value of Bitcoin. But the social value is much more elusive. It's much more difficult to estimate the social value. The social value of money comes from the energy that's saved by using that money. And money is saving energy, because if you are not using money, you are doing barter. You have to move things around at the same place to do barter. For instance, if you are trading apple and bananas, that means you have to move the fruits. And the energy you are saving with money is that you don't have to move the fruits. You just move the money, and the energy saved is in fact the value of the monetary system. It's the value of using a monetary system compared to barter. So even a monetary system as a whole can be its value can be measured in joule in the energy that's saved. But evidently the calculation is too complex. Would be too complex to perform, because you have too many goods and services being traded. So you can do it in qualitative analysis, but not quantitative analysis.
Is there a way to measure the social value? I mean, the energy value of a Bitcoin is, you can actually measure it, because like, oh, how much did it cost to produce that one Bitcoin? I mean, you don't know for sure where this Bitcoin was actually mined and all those things, but is there a way to actually also measure the social value of a Bitcoin, of like how much social value is in there versus how much energy value?
Yeah, you can. Well, the first rough estimate I would suggest in doing so would be using the law of Metcalfe that says, the value of a network is the square, is a function of the square of the number of the users. So for a monetary system that's a network, I would use the same formula and say it's quadratic. It's a function of the square of the number of users. And that would give you a reasonably good estimate of the social value. But again, it would be difficult to be more precise than a rough estimate. But I suppose economists could do it. It's just that they have to. Most economists have to understand Bitcoin even before they understand what's in my book and thermodynamics.
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch, and ever since then I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from Coin Vigilante represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what BitBox did. BitBox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a BitBox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, Yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. Yeah, it's funny how most economics people don't even really understand Bitcoin and dismiss it just out of the gate. It's really interesting how many uninformed experts there are on economics that have no clue about Bitcoin.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
No, you're right. And Friedrich Hayek, the economist that was Nobel Prize of Economy, that's the Austrian School of Economy, used to say, I believe he was saying something like, economist is not a real job. You have to have a real job and to do economy, because if you don't have a real job, you cannot talk about the economy. And I think he was absolutely right. And I would add that today economists don't know a thing about Bitcoin, but they don't know either sufficiently about energy, as the science of energy is completely alien to them. And I think without knowing a little bit about the science of energy, you cannot do economics. That's what I found studying energy.
Super interesting. There's a lot of interesting examples of those fields, because if you've never worked in an entrepreneurial spirit or like somewhere in the private market, and you've kind of learned economics from university and then just switched to being a professor directly in economics, you don't really know anything about economics outside of the things that are taught in the books. And you're like, oh, like have you actually like learned about the economic structure, how it's actually working out there, and not just like how it is described in the book and theories, because theory is sometimes very different to what's actually going on.
Yeah, some people sometimes compare this kind of education, this kind of academia, to a Ponzi scheme, because in fact they are saying, well, you have one professor of economy, and in fact his job is to train a bunch of new economic professors, but at no point in time their work is useful to society as a whole. They are just feeding their own Ponzi, and there is some truth to this remark. That's pretty critic of our economics. But that's what I think about economics. It's not a real science. It's just a subject that everybody should work, and you can only work on it as if you have an experience in real life with a real job.
Yeah, like asking an economics, like what's his opinion? First, we should ask like, oh, did you build a company, or like what did you do? I don't know if building a company is necessary to understand economics, but I think it's very hard to understand the full scope of the financial system and the economic situation if you have no experience in building a product, finding a market, and dealing with different tariffs, building global things. Like it's really like I learned a lot about our system once I went from being an employed like I learned a lot about economics when I switched from school to being employed. I learned a lot more from being employed to being self-employed, and now from being self-employed to having 2-3 people working for you and doing kind of more entrepreneurial spirit, like more startup thing. I haven't built big companies yet, so I have a lot of levels to go and lots of things to still discover, but only on the small level. I'm like, there's so much I had no clue about when I was in school. And then I had also so much that I had no clue about when I just was employed, because there's a different mindset, a different experience that you make with those things. So I like that, learning while doing it.
Yeah, I think we can also note that the profession of the economics, the economic professors and all that, they are really an offspring of the central banking system, because they think they can approach the economy on a global basis because there is a monopoly of money. So they become expert of that monopoly, and they believe they are in the belief that they can control the entire economy with the monopoly, which is obviously a myth. It's an illusion. And Hayek explains that very well in his writings. It's an illusion that you can control the economy with a single monetary system. But they believe so, and they are an offspring of this central banking system, what some people call the Fiat standard, that Saifedean Amos wrote the book about the Fiat system, Fiat standard. I think that's really a result of the Fiat system. The state of the economics in academia is really an offspring of this central banking approach.
One thing is interesting, what I've learned just with being entrepreneurial minded, is that prices are subjective and debatable. It's really interesting with before I was doing anything other than being employed, I just went into the shops and like bought it, and I was like, oh, the price is this, I have to pay this. And now I recently bought 3 monitor screens, and I negotiated and I got a 12% discount, like in like a normal electronics store. Like previously I wouldn't even thought about asking for a discount, but that's just a random story. I don't know if this has anything to do with that. I just thought about that with the learnings you have along the way from doing things.
That's a useful approach of the economy, because you are saving money that way.
Exactly, and
everything is
I
negotiable.
learned that the prices are set by humans, and those humans might change their mind if you ask them nicely about it.
And they are priced by imperfect systems, because there is no such thing as a perfect monetary system. So price distortions are commonplace, because there is no such thing again as perfect markets or perfect information.
That's true. Yeah. It's interesting. And the market is not efficient.
Well, reasonably efficient, but not perfect. That's for sure.
And what is actually for you the main learning, or like if people only take away one thing from a book, like what do you think this one thing should be?
I think they should understand the 3 principles that I write about in the book. The 3 principles that govern energy. That is, in fact, the universe surrounding us. Knowing and understanding the 3 principles is really helpful, because it explains so many phenomena, and everything becomes less mysterious and less frightening if you know about the 3 principles. So my book is mostly about the 3 principles. First is principle of conservation for energy. That is, you don't consume energy, you use energy, you can only transform it. Energy was never created and it cannot be destroyed. So it has no beginning and no end. So that's something people should know about. Second principle is about entropy. It introduces the concept of entropy. So people should know about entropy. That is something that can be information that can be replicated and that serves, in fact, to that's a measure of the organization of the world and of our own body. And the third principle is the most interesting and the most intriguing, and less known than the first two principles. And in fact, the title of the book could have been the third principle, but my publisher preferred energy is the flip side of money because it makes connection with my background in Bitcoin, etc. But to be honest, it could have been titled the third principle. And the third principle says simply that any system will tend to self-organize to maximize the flow of energy through it. And when I say system, it's just any system, including living beings like humans. So we are designed, and it's in our profound nature, to maximize the amount of energy we capture and transform. And to maximize this flow of energy, we self-organize. We self-organize by growing. And we self-organize as a species, as member of the species. So we self-organize as individuals. For instance, when we learn, we self-organize through learning, but we also self-organize as members of the species, which is itself a self-organizing system. So it's like, Russian puppets. You have, elementary particles, atoms, molecules, living beings, etc., all the way up to the entire universe that are all systems that are forms of energy that try to self-organize to maximize their flow of energy. So it's kind of fascinating phenomenon that's at work. But it explains, for instance, Darwinian evolution. Why is it that there is a phenomenon like Darwinian evolution? It's very intriguing, and it explains very simply by the third principle, because species will tend to self-organize to maximize their flow of energy. That is, their ability to capture energy. For instance, if it's a species of predators, they will evolve to capture as many prey as possible, and also they will evolve to be able to multiply, to have as many members as possible. As a system, a species will tend to grow and multiply the number of its members. But because all the species are doing the same thing, they're all trying to maximize their flow of energy. They are in competition for the available flows of energy. And so again, Darwinian evolution easily explained with the third principle. But there are many other examples that I give in the book that show that the third principle is at work and how important it is to understand the third principle, because without it, things tend to look mysterious. And you have a very uniting explanation at hand with science of energy.
This is super interesting because so you basically, it's like flowing of the energy. So basically people trying to capture as much resources as possible in their own realm. Is this explaining why Elon Musk and other successful people trying to keep trying to capture more and more resources, even though they don't really need to? Like they could also just like relax. He could also do less,
absolutely. It explains why you are happy when you think you feel this flow of energy, and you are happy when you learn and you reduce your entropy because you know it's maximizing, it's contributing to maximizing the flow of energy. Because self-organization is just making it easier for energy to go through the system. So that's as simple as that. There are many obstacles for a system for energy to flow through it. But if you self-organize, you're just making it easier for the energy to flow through it. And that's why you're happy when you capture energy, and you're happy when you're reducing your entropy. And when your entropy, for instance, becomes stable, you don't learn anymore. You're bored. When people talk about boredom, but boredom is just a sign that you're not reducing your entropy anymore. There is no more entropy flowing. That means if entropy is not flowing, energy is not flowing. The second principle tells us that to reduce entropy, you have to supply energy. So that means if you're not reducing your entropy, your flow of energy is not increasing, and as a result, you will feel depressed. And that's a good example of these principles at work, and in fact, influencing our level of happiness.
Is then fiat kind of minimizing or distorting the free flow of energy while Bitcoin is kind of maximizing this? Is fiat kind of distortion in this free flow of energy?
Fear is an emotion. Yes, and emotions are like algorithms. That's explained. That's another book that's dealing with this. It's the book called Sapiens by Yuval Harari. Sapiens explains that yes, you have emotions at work in a species, and they are like a fast way of thinking and reacting. So they are algorithms. So fear, for instance, is a survival mechanism to decide to escape a predator or face a predator. So you are activating an algorithm that's called fear, and emotions are essentially algorithms. And that's an interesting observation I found, because people have generally speaking, and that's the heritage of 19th century Germany. It was called the Romantic movement, and people have a very romantic concept of emotions, like they are. Emotions are desirable. Emotions make you happy. Emotions make you humans. In fact, it's the exact opposite. What makes us human is our rational side, because emotions can be found in animals. Animals can love, for instance. Animals can have fear because they are algorithms. Again, they are found in many evolved living beings. And the thing that makes us human is, in fact, reasoning. So it's the exact opposite of what people tend to say. They tend to say that emotions makes us human, but no, it's the opposite. And I think it's important to understand that and to find a balance and regard emotions with a distance, not become enslaved by our emotions, but and that's a teaching you find in, for instance, Oriental philosophies like Buddhism. Buddhism teaches you to beware of your emotions because they can be misleading and they can make you unhappy. And for me, it's an interesting observation, because my thesis is that what makes you happy is your flow of energy and entropy. It's not your emotions. If you understand that, it's a much more general approach that's valid for many more people than if you say emotions will make you happy, because that's very subjective. If you say it's your flow of energy and entropy that makes you happy, then it's applicable to almost universally to everybody. So it's important to understand this concept because of that. But again, it's very like I said, it's a life-changing discovery if you are on a Socratic path, trying to know yourself. It's evidently a very important finding, and that's again why I wanted to share it in my book.
I asked about the fiat currency, not fear, but I loved your answer so much, so I kept you going.
Sorry,
it's really interesting. This distortion of fear in the reasoning, because it's really true. Because if an animal, they don't reason, they have an instinct and just do it, which can be quite nice. But honestly, the reasoning behind things and the pushing back on an instinct that we have is the thing that differentiates us from animals. Then it's like, okay, then what is AI? That's that's like only reasoning without emotions. I don't know, like maybe the play of having emotions and reasoning is what makes us human.
Yeah, emotions can be life-saving, mechanism. Right? So I don't underestimate emotions. I just say, don't overestimate emotions. They can be overrated as well.
Yeah, but back to the question I wanted to get to is the fiat currencies. Is this also distorting kind of the free flowing of energy and kind of making the market distorted as it kind of captures energy without really providing any value to society?
Yeah, absolutely. The fiat system in general, and because fiat system doesn't apply only to money. You have fiat spirit, I would say, in education, for instance, with the inflation of diplomas. For instance, you have, for instance, I can see it in France, where many more people get diplomas today than maybe 50 years ago, and as a result, there is a depreciating value in diplomas because there is this inflation of diplomas. So the fiat spirit can really infiltrate many levels of society, and that's explained again by other people like Seyr in Amos. I believe Jimmy Song also wrote about this with Fiat Ruins Everything. That's an excellent book. Also, Fiat Ruins Everything. So yeah, going back to fiat money, I totally agree with you. It's distorting prices because it's depreciating money. So it's making inflation is the resulting phenomenon. And Hayek, again, has written extensively about that, the effect of inflation. And the principal critics of inflation, according to Hayek, is that it's an accelerating phenomenon. In other words, if you start with mild inflation that looks like it's under control, is showing that in fact it's not sustainable. It has to accelerate to maintain itself. Otherwise, you have what we are seeing, which is repeatedly financial crisis to correct the effects of inflation. So yes, it's distorting prices. In fact, my point is more that the monopoly of money is more detrimental than anything else. Inflation is just a consequence of the fiat system and the debt money, but the most detrimental to society, in my view, is, and Hayek is I'm a disciple of Hayek, evidently, in that, saying that the monopoly of money is very detrimental because there is no reason, in fact, for that monopoly other than enrich tens of thousands of people in Europe. But for 400 million people in Europe, so it's really a very small oligarchy of people that are running the fiat system, the central banking system. But that's really detrimental because you can have really capitalism until you have this monopoly of money. You have to have competition between currencies to experience capitalism and economic freedom. Otherwise, you have what's called sometimes crony capitalism. That is capitalism between a small circle of people that have access to very large amounts of money. But capitalism at family scale or individual scale become very, very difficult. And that's exactly what we are seeing with the middle class losing purchasing power and very large organizations developing through crony capitalism.
It's almost like Bitcoin is an extension or a representation of just natural laws, like physics and energy and all those things.
Yeah, and it's enabling the competition between currencies because before Bitcoin, it was very difficult to launch a currency and say, look, I have something that can compete with the euro or the dollar. It was extremely difficult before Bitcoin to say so. Now with Bitcoin, everybody can say, well, there is a system that competes with the euro or gets against the dollar, and that's called Bitcoin. In fact, the Americans, I believe, Robin, you are based in the US, so you can see it even better than me, even though I have lived in the US many years. But you could say that Americans have understood that Bitcoin is indeed a competition for the dollar. So instead of trying to kill it, they turn it into a US currency with major players like strategy.com, Coinbase, Kraken, very major players in the Bitcoin ecosystem that are based in America. So they really have a controlling hand on Bitcoin to some extent. At least they are not like Europeans. Europeans are playing it completely wrong because they're trying to nip it in the bud when in fact it's flourishing everywhere. So they are really, the euro is going to suffer because of that, and Europe is going to suffer because of that. But Americans have been very smart about Bitcoin by embracing it now with the election of Donald Trump. They are embracing it, and now they have two. They have the best of both worlds. They have the US dollar as the best fiat money, and they have Bitcoin, a good chunk of Bitcoin, which is the best peer-to-peer money. So, yeah, competition is now possible thanks to Bitcoin. That's really the game changer, is to enable competition between currencies.
I'm also actually from Europe, but I'm happy to see that you don't spot my Austrian accent.
I knew. I was wondering where it came from, but I wasn't able to say it was Austrian or South African or whatever.
That's
I'm
amazing.
glad
Thank you so much.
that you're coming from the same country as Friedrich Hayek, because that's someone I admire very much.
I'm in Austria, and it was funny because when I learned about Bitcoin, I was not aware of about Austrian economics, and then I heard the podcast. Like I was listening to Michael Seyr, to Seyr, to all those great people in Bitcoin, and they all kept referring to Austrian economics, and I was like, what's there so special about Austria? I live in Austria. I know our economic system is not that special. And then I learned, there's a difference between the current Austrian economics and the actual Austrian economics as a school of thought, and the Austrian school of economics. So that was really interesting for me as an Austrian to get into Bitcoin. I was not aware about Hayek. I was not aware about Austrian economics at all before Bitcoin, even as an Austrian living in Austria. So that's just a small side note on that. But it's really interesting because I did not think that the US will be the first to really, or not the first, but the first major country that really kind of steamrolls ahead and takes this Bitcoin venture on, because they really don't need to. They have the reserve currency, they have the US dollar, but it's very clever of them to do it. And it's also, they kind of do Bretton Woods 2.0 with distributing US dollar stable coins all across the world and them buying Bitcoin themselves. I mean, they haven't bought Bitcoin, but I think they will, and they are doing mining things and all those things. So it's super fascinating what the implications of Trump as a president adopting Bitcoin more and more will be long term. But I think it will be very positive for the US, and I don't think it will be very positive for the European Union.
Yeah, I totally agree. Anyway, Hayek is really a genius because, and he deserves to be cited by many Bitcoiners, because he wrote things in the 70s. In 1976, he wrote a book called Denationalization of Money. And if you read that book, it's a short book, you could almost see that he's describing Bitcoin. When he talks about the competition between currencies, he's almost describing something like Bitcoin, even though evidently he couldn't foresee Bitcoin, but he wrote about it as if it existed. So that's fascinating. That's a sign of genius, I would say.
It's fascinating to think about people that kind of described Bitcoin before it even was a thing, and doing that. Yeah, I have one question that I ask each and every one of my guests that comes on my show, and the question is always the same: what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
In fact, the book is not strictly about Bitcoin or energy. It's like I said, it's also about philosophy of science, and philosophy of science. I mean. It's again Socratic approach. So if I can share in my book some of my understanding of philosophies like Taoism and Buddhism, I think that's something you can learn that's very useful for in everyday life. I think these philosophies can make people happier, and especially if they are like me, engineers, so they are not necessarily extroverts. It's really telling about the worth of introverts in society, and again, there are many ways to talk about it, but the book is really about that, about knowing the basics of Taoism and Buddhism, and understanding that happiness is the path. And happiness is within yourself. It's not something you will find outside of yourself. It's a construct, but it's. I hope people can learn from that through my book and through these conversations.
Oh, I love that. That's really cool. It's those implications of something outside of Bitcoin that makes it really fun. Because I asked that question intentionally because I think Bitcoin at some point will be extremely boring. It will be just there as air. It will be there as the HTTP protocol, as the TCP/IP protocol. I'm already slowly with that one question entering that era in like 5, 10, 15 years. I don't know when it will come, when Bitcoin will become boring, and I still want to have a podcast to talk about interesting topics that I find interesting. So that's kind of my small.
I'm sure you'll find out something interesting to do.
Exactly, yeah. But right now, Bitcoin is for me the most interesting thing I could spend my time on. That's why I do it. And thank you so much for that. I have one end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question: what would you do when Bitcoin hits $10 million?
I don't think I would change anything because I'm not selling. I'm not selling. Maybe it would enable me to do things that I don't imagine doing today. For instance, things in the field of education or art. Because I'm a believer in the value of beauty as in the path to happiness. There is beauty as a building block for the path of happiness. So art is important, and education obviously is the stepping stones, because without it we are in trouble. And there is a concern that people with AI and all these tools might find less incentives to get an education, and that would be a shame, because education is about knowing yourself. It's not about necessarily finding a job. That's the kind of things I would spend perhaps more resources as Bitcoin gains value. Maybe I spend more resources on these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Yeah, like thinking about the implications of that. But I don't know, maybe at 10 million, it's not that interesting anymore to have a Bitcoin podcast. I think that might
be in the Bahamas.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pierre, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you and where can people find your book?
Well, it's on Amazon. Again, it's called Energy, the Flip Side of Money. So it's mostly online. And you are the first, practically one of the very first podcast and journalists that I'm meeting about the book. So I'm very glad we did it because I know you are Bitcoiner. But now I have to hit the road and make it known also. So it's, I continue doing that.
Thank you so much. I feel honored to be the first one. Like, you're a true Bitcoin OG, and I love talking with Bitcoiners. I mean, that's the whole thing I'm doing. So thank you so much for being on. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.